It's so complicated. Okay, I apologize for the short time. I have to leave here by 5 o'clock Israel time, which is in now about 16 minutes. So we're going to try to get this in as quick as possible. And if we need to try to do another one, hopefully maybe we could do another one this week, and maybe it'll run a little bit more smoothly if we could figure it out in advance. So we'll get started. And I just want to share a few thoughts with you. I don't know. It just struck me today to look back in my notes. I used to be a very meticulous note taker when I was learning in Kollel, in Chicago, and in the summer of Tafshin Samech Beis. So we're talking 12 years ago, exactly 12 years ago. Sort of Scheinberg, Zichrono Levracha, Rav Scheinberg was alive, and he came to visit Chicago, and he gave a whole shiur at the Chicago Community Kollel that was open to the whole city of Chicago. And I guess I'm proud of this. I guess a couple closer to your age than to my age now. I took all these notes from it, and I had it all these years. I don't know, some reason today I looked at these notes because I remember that some of the questions that came up at the time had to do with terrorism and stuff that was going on in Israel at the time, but I didn't remember the details. So I looked it up, and so I looked up the year Tafshin Samech Beis. Hi guys, hello. I looked up the year Tafshin Samech Beis, the summertime of Tafshin Samech Beis. So that was the year of 2001-2002. The year of 2001-2002, that summertime, Rav Scheinberg, Zichrono Levracha, came to Chicago. So I just looked up today online. I just looked at the history of what was going on, because I want to read you the answers to the questions that he got, because I think they are as applicable to what we're going through right now, as they were then. So I just want to tell you something. I put in one of the posts that I sent recently with that Klal Yisrael needs your tefillos as much as they ever have in your lifetime. There's obviously a tzara that we're experiencing, but I don't know if any of you were alive, or if you remember. I mean, you were alive, obviously. If you were children, then what it was like then. So it was hard to believe when I read the numbers, because I lived through this and I was an adult when this was going on. In 2001, there were 40 suicide bombings. 40 different suicide bombings in Israel in the year 2001. In the year 2002, there were 47. Over 2 years, there were 87 suicide bombings, resulting in over 350 deaths and thousands of injuries. And injuries are not just a broken bone. Injury could be losing limbs, losing eyes, all sorts of things. And so it's hard to imagine the tzara that Klal Yisrael was in at the time. Again, I remember it. I was living in Chicago. I was not living here. I'm sure it was different. But the sense of desperation and the tzar that Klal Yisrael was in at the time, I think it was probably greater than we're experiencing now, because, like I said, we're under a tremendous protection. Mamish again is still ongoing, open, miraculous protection from Hashem over here. And at that time, obviously, for whatever reason, the Shmira was in a state of Hester, and hundreds of people were being killed, families being torn apart. I mean, literally, it was a terrible time period. And that's when Rav Scheinberg came to America. So I want to just read you a few of the questions and answers that he had over here, that people had, because again, you can imagine, being in that situation, and especially being in Chutz La'aretz, feeling helpless. So I just want to address a couple of points, and then make one or two other quick points. And again, it's not a lot of time, but again, we'll continue, but at least hopefully get the conversation started. So number one, some of these questions are just like halacha questions about the situation. Number one, is it mutter to travel to Eretz Yisrael under these circumstances? The first question that was asked. You can imagine what the feeling must have been at the time. The first question that was asked in this public forum. Number one, can people travel to Eretz Yisrael at the time? So I wrote it down literally verbatim. I'm just going to tell you the words that he said. It's quite safe. That's what he said at this time. 87 suicide bombings. That's what he said. It's quite safe. If it were a sakana, it would be asur for me to be there. That's what he was saying. Everybody should come. This is what he said. Somebody asked him, somebody raised their hand and said, what if I'm not going to do, mitzvahs, I'm not going to learn there, I'm not moving there, I'm just coming to tour. He said, perfectly all right, even to tour, but be careful where to go. That was what he said, Rav Scheinberg. Again, in the midst of an unbelievable situation over here, where literally people were afraid to go on buses at that time and to be in public places, whereas now I'm telling you, life is not, again, in some places it certainly is, in Sderot, in Ashkelon, and those places where it's closer, it's life is completely turned upside down. But for the rest of Eretz Yisrael, for the Merkaz and for the area of Yerushalayim, and it's just not like that this time. I'm telling you, we're living in an incredible shmira. But that's what he said. And he said, next question: should life in Eretz Yisrael go on as usual? Should things just go on? He said, as usual. That was his answer. People should just go on, do your things. If you go to work, go do your tiulim, whatever a person should do. That's what he said. You should go on. Okay. Then he said, what about listening to the news and the newspapers and all of these things? So this, he said something very interesting. He said, if it's going to help a person to daven, he said, then it's mutter even on Shabbos. The question was, if a person heard about a bombing on Shabbos, can you tell somebody about it on Shabbos, when normally it's usher to share news of a tzar? He said, if it's going to help a person daven, then it's okay. He said, otherwise, he said, accomplish something. Don't waste your time, reading. Don't waste your time with, reading, this. And especially nowadays, when a person can get lost in all sorts of opinions and all these other things, he said, do something instead. Learn Torah. He was talking to men, primarily. He said, learn Torah, do something, and accomplish more that way. And he said the same thing about going to rallies and those types of things, attending rallies. He said certainly not to miss learning Torah. It's bittul Torah. And he said certainly learning Torah will accomplish more. And Then somebody asked him, is this the Chevlei Mashiach? Somebody asked Rav Sheinberg, is this the Chevlei Mashiach? So he says, when Mashiach comes, then we'll know. That's what he said. When Mashiach comes, we'll know what the Chevlei Mashiach were. And then he said he'd prefer not to discuss it. And somebody raised their hand and they said, well, let's say this was the Chevlei Mashiach. Let's say, so what would you tell us? What would you tell people to do? So he said, what Chazal say in the Chevlei Mashiach, do more chesed, improve your learning. He says, he quoted Chazal, Ma yasa adam v'yinatzel mechevlei Mashiach. What does a person do in order to save himself from Chevlei Mashiach? He says, Yasuk b'Torah v'gmilas chasadim. Person should toil in Torah and toil in chesed to go and be gomel chesed for other people. This is what he said. He said also about the reaction of the world, like I spoke about. I don't know if you saw a little clip I put up last week. People get very caught up in the reaction of the world. They get all frustrated and angry and all these types of things. And all these things. He said, learn more musar. That's what he said. He said you shouldn't feel that way. You shouldn't take it with the heart what the world has to say. And like I don't know if you saw the video I put up. I told you I get a chizuk from it. It's mamish. And you see the nevuah coming true. I felt afterwards it was like Rabbi Akiva. Because like someone asked me why do you get a chizuk from seeing that Klal Yisrael is as shafel as the Navi says it would be. So I don't know. I said it's pashut like Rabbi Akiva. Like Rabbi Akiva when he saw the foxes at the Makom HaMikdash. So everyone else is crying. But Rabbi Akiva said, it gives a chizuk because when you see this comes true. So obviously this is all meant to be. It's all part of, that's not the lashon he said. He said obviously the other nevuahs come true. I'm extrapolating at least. So what I feel it means is that it means it's all meant to be. This is all part of the Rebbeinu Shalom's plan. When you see that the nations of the world in such a completely twisted, illogical, how possibly could you defend such a opinion type of a way, take a stance against Klal Yisrael, and it's straight out in the psukim. So that tells us that this is happening for a reason, and that's why I think I'm just adding this to what Rav Sheinberg said. But he said not to take it personally, not to get frustrated at the world's reaction. It's like obvious, this is the world. This is going to be the world's reaction. Okay, I don't know. I felt it was important just to share that with you. These are things from literally it was not alive anymore, unfortunately, but from the Gedolei Hador, and his perspective, on the things that were going on at the time and what a person could do. I want to make two more quick points, and then if there's time for more, I'll try to get it more also. Okay, I don't know if this made the news so much in Chutz La'aretz this past week. That they discovered like this massive terror attack did anybody hear about this thing that was planned for Rosh Hashanah night? Did anybody hear about this? It was like it was in some news. I don't know if you heard about this. It's something quite unbelievable. They were planning what they've been planning, and again, I don't know if this was in the mainstream news in America or not. It was like in the Israeli news sites all Erev Shabbos, that Hamas had been in the process of what are all these tunnels about? What are all these tunnels for that they had there? They were planning this year for Rosh Hashanah night, in 2 months from now. They were planning like a massive army-scale terror attack on Eretz Yisrael. They were planning on sending in thousands of fighters dressed up as chayalim. Completely, they found storehouses of chayalim uniforms, like all the infiltrators recently that they've been catching, a few here and a few there, and blowing them up. Baruch Hashem, they've all been dressed as chayalim. One time they wouldn't even shoot on them. until they saw the guns that they had were not Chayal issue guns, and then they fired because the mamish couldn't tell them apart. They were planning on sending in thousands of Hamas fighters dressed as Chayalim through these tunnels all at the same time, and to Pashut overrun the south of Israel. They were Pashut planning on a mass slaughter of Jews with hundreds of handcuffs and sedatives to bring back dozens and hundreds of Jewish. Can you imagine such a thing? So I was learning with somebody on Erev Shabbos. He said, you believe the schus of these three bachrim, right? The schus of these three guys that hitching a ride that night and whatever it is, because of this Maisa that they got killed in this terrible situation. Yeah, but because of that, it set off this whole situation, and they had no idea. They had no idea this was coming. That's also Stam. It upsets me so much. I have to tell you, it upsets me so much. I driving around now. Not here, not like in the Frum neighborhood so much, but in other places in Yerushalayim, these huge signs, Yisrael B'tach B'tzahal. I mamish, there's nothing that frightens me more than this. The Yisrael B'tach B'tzahal, that the Jews, the Yisrael Klal Yisrael, we trust in the army. There's nothing that frightens me more, and it's such a busha that they had this massive plan with dozens of tunnels literally under their feet, and they had no idea. They knew nothing about it. If not for this whole thing, they would not have known anything about this. The Shmira. I don't know. It's like I said to somebody on Shabbos. Like I don't know. Like that they. To one hand, maybe to be afraid, like, oh my gosh, you believe what? Or the other hand, like to say, it's like almost a joke, like they could plan such a thing. I don't know. Anything could happen. Hashem Yishmor. But it's an unbelievable thing that you guys heard about this. People heard about this. It's an unbelievable thing. They're planning doing rockets at the same time. A massive. This is what they've been planning for. They were planning for years, stockpiling and digging and all of these things for years in order to be able to do this massive attack. One other point, again, this has to do with 12 years. 12 years? You said 12 years. 12 years, as I say. Yeah. Unbelievable. The other thing, what they said, I know you could look this up, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but they had somebody read out all the statistics of what they could have built in Gaza with the concrete that they used in these tunnels. Yeah, how much money it cost per tunnel and the amount of concrete that they used per tunnel. They could have been, it was like 19 health clinics and 7 schools and 6 mosques and 2 housing projects. They look it up online and share it around. Unbelievable statistics. And they tell us, just lift the embargo, and we'll stop that. It's like such a, and the world hears it. I don't know. It's not much crazy. Okay, I don't know what to say. Anyway, that's as far as the Shmira is concerned. I want to raise one last point, and then if there's time for something more, I'll get to it. Rav Leichter, so this, as I was speaking to Rabbi Fix right before I left, I was just in school, we were working, and I came home to do this now, and so I asked Rabbi Fix, what to say, what to add. So he told me, he listens to a lot of shiurim from a Reuven Leichter Shlita. So he said, he said a very nice idea that I just wanted to share with you, which again, it gets a lot of people keep on asking, what to do and what to take on. And a lot of people have made suggestions and have told me things that they're doing, taking on learning Shmir Salashon, Tulachas Adev Chavetz Chaim, which is a tremendous thing, which certainly encourage, and all sorts of other things. But I don't know, and what to do as a group. As you know from the past, I don't know. I'm very I'm hesitant in terms of deciding on these types of things and what to do, because I feel it's a very individual thing. However, one thing that Rav Leichter said, which I think is something that we can relate to, is the following. Everybody feels, we want to be able to do something for the Chayalim, to be able to be nosei ba'ol with the Chayalim, right? What does it mean to do something about it? So certainly we're doing our mitzvahs, but you want to be nosei ba'ol. What does it mean to be nosei ba'ol? It means to get a sense of what they're feeling, and get a sense of their experience, so that I have a sense of that, and I can feel for them in a real way. That's what it means to be nosei ba'ol. So he says, how can you be nosei ba'ol with the person who's putting their life on the line, and literally every time they turn a corner, they don't know what's going to blow up, and where an Arab's going to pop out of a hole and throw a grenade, and they Pasha don't know. I'm telling the stories. I don't have time now, but the people in the shul who have children that are in Gaza. Rabbi Brussel has a son who's there. You can keep in mind Nachum David, and I think Rivka Brussel is Brussel's son is Mamish, a commander in Gaza. For those of you who know who he is, it's Mamish. I have in my mind all the time on my tefillas. Also there was a guy who was in there and he didn't make Havdalah until Tuesday, like all these, shilas, all these types of things. It's mamish, it's going on. So he says, but how can you relate to that? So he said, if you had to, what's the midah of a chayal? It is 100% complete Mesiras Nefesh. They're completely masur. They're completely given over to what they're doing. There's no them. There's no choices. there's no like, oh, you know what, under other circumstances I feel like doing this, but I'm a little bit tired. It's a little inconvenient. Ain't davar kazeh. It doesn't matter if going and doing something is putting their life on the line. Literally, there's no choices. And again, also just you see hashgacha, how it works and how everything Hashem does b'diktuk. One of the biggest hits that we took. There were one time there were the 8 chayalim that were killed at one time. So they were in an armored carrier. And it got stuck. There was a technical breakdown, which is a very big controversy over here because it was an outdated piece of equipment and people were very upset about it. But it broke down. It literally broke down. And 2 people had to get out in order to fix it, in order to work on it and do what they had to do. So it was the commander who took charge and another person who jumped out to do it. And as they jumped out, it got hit by a rocket and they were the only 2 that were saved. Right? The 2 people that put themselves in the biggest sakana to get out, in order to... Hashem works all the cheshbonos and everything. Anyway, he said that's the midah. A chayal is completely masur. It's complete mesiras nefesh. He said, now look, for us to live that way, on a normal basis, to be moser nefesh for Hashem, to be moser nefesh for Klal Yisrael, moser nefesh for Chesed, for helping people, right? To live that way is not shaykh to do. It's a person will go crazy. We can't push ourselves like that. It's just not shaykh to do. But now, in a matzav of a tzara for Klal Yisrael, in a matzav of trying to think of ways to build up schusim for protection of us and for protection of the chayalim that are putting ourselves on the line. So now's not a time for slacking. Now's not a time for looking for outs and looking for excuses. And I mentioned this idea last week. I don't know if anybody saw just the halachos of the 9 days. I did a very brief thing. I said in the beginning, every year there's all the subsequent questions that come up, and there's all sorts of loopholes or ways in which you could be lenient to these types of things. I thought maybe this year to be more careful in these halachos of avelus and to be nosei ba'ol in the avelus of Klal Yisrael, and sort of like is taking it even to a much deeper and more powerful level, to be nosei ba'ol of the chayalim. And this is we have to in some way try to kick up the mesiras nefesh. And again, I can't quantify it. I can't say this is what we should do. Everyone should pick a mitzvah and say I don't know. But to take this idea and to keep it as a constant. If there's an area of our lives that we've been thinking about working on and wanting to do but not wanting to do and not knowing, so no, this is a time. This is a time to go to nefesh. This is a time to push myself much harder than I would normally. There are people that are pushing themselves inhumanly hard for me and my protection, every day right now. Now is not a time for me to be slacking off in my chesed, in my helping another person, somebody needs my help in whatever way it is, and in my bein adon l'makom, whatever it is. Now is not a time for slacking off. Now is a time for kicking it up a notch, for pushing myself, harder, extending myself, in ways that I would not otherwise. So again, I to make it more specific, I can't, put it into a box for you. But if you're thinking about in what lines, where to be thinking, so think about what's very hard right now. What's very hard in your life? What's very challenging for you? What's something that's not going to be easy to... Okay, it's a time to, so that's where to go. Okay, unfortunately, I have to go. I'm sorry, ladies. Mr. We'll be able to continue. And, we'll continue the conversation. Chana, thank you very, very much for putting this together. If you want to put another one together this week and speak to me about timing, I'm open to doing it. I know the timing is hard in terms of daytime, nighttime, but maybe if there's a time that we can do it, I'd love to continue the conversation. Okay, Yishol Davin. Okay, bye-bye, everyone.